Well, first of all, thank you very much, choirs, for your wonderful music so far. It's always a celebration when we come in on Palm Sunday. So life does have its ups and downs. During the Middle Ages, people called those ups and downs the wheel of fortune. Life, they said, was like sitting on a wheel, and the wheel spins. As long as life is going along fine, we're at the top of the wheel. At the top, it feels like all is right in the world. Other days, for no apparent reason, we seem to be at the bottom, crushed by the wheel for no apparent reason, and we despair. Most days, it seems like we're either going up or going down. But either way, life has its ups and downs. Our two gospel readings today refer to 2 days, less than a week apart in Jesus' life. The first day we call Palm Sunday, when Jesus enters Jerusalem triumphantly. Today we remember how the crowds cheered and waved the palms with joyous vigor as Jesus entered Jerusalem. Jesus was on the top of the world. The second day is the reason we call this Sunday also Passion Sunday. It refers to what will happen next, especially when Jesus appears in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before he is arrested and carried off to die on the cross. Jesus despairs so deeply, says the Gospel of Luke, that his anguish caused him to sweat drops of blood. So this is Holy Week. It's the beginning. It begins joyously with Jesus riding upon a donkey into Jerusalem, but all too soon the wheel flips upside down. Jesus is rejected by those in power, nailed to a cross, and laid in a cold grave. Easter is still beyond the horizon, beyond our sight. After today, Palm Sunday, we will walk through the Garden of Gethsemane beneath the cross of Jesus before we can even dream about the warmth of Easter morn. In this week, we experience the whole range of human emotions, the breadth and depth of joy and the despair of sadness, all in and through the life of Jesus. Immediately before being arrested, Jesus is taken to be crucified. Before he's taken to be crucified, Jesus takes his disciples, Peter, James, and John, to the Garden of Gethsemane. And notice what he says to his disciples. He says, "Just sit here with me while I pray." Doesn't ask them to do anything else. Takes Peter, James, and John along with him, and he just simply doesn't want to be left alone in that moment. Jesus explains, "I am sorrowful. I am grieved unto death. Wait here. Just stay awake. That's all I ask." I find this a remarkable moment in the scriptures. Nowhere else except maybe on the cross is Jesus more human, more like us. Maybe it's the other way around. When the wheel of fortune turns and crushes us at the bottom, when we are in our own gardens of Gethsemane, there is no place where in our despair we are more like Jesus. Origen, an early church author, said, "This passage is a mighty wonder. Just look, Jesus' soul in this moment does not know which way to turn, what to hold on to, or even how to right himself, for he throws himself upon the ground in despair." We all feel untethered like that at times. Facing death, our own or someone else's, we often have little or nothing to hold on to. With death looming before us and before Jesus, Jesus is afraid. He throws himself to the ground, a man overcome with anguish. In that moment, Jesus even begs God, "If it be possible, let this hour of my death, pass me by." John Chrysostom in the 4th century said, "Jesus despairs because God has implanted in every one of us, in our human nature, and therefore in Jesus, a love for this life." That is why Jesus, staring at death, still wants to live. He's human, like us, and we are like him. A number of years ago, my 93-year-old father-in-law, a dear man, approached me and as he knew his life was coming to an end, and asked me to do his funeral. And I said I would do it only if he helped me write the sermon. So what we did is I set up a series of questions, and he answered them, and then I preached that at his sermon. And the first question I asked him, I just said, tell me about life. He'd been through World War II. He'd been through a variety of things throughout his life, and he looked at me and he said, I don't believe that if I live to be 120 or 2020, that it will ever be long enough. Life is just never long enough. Despair is our only human emotion at times when we are faced with death. But we learned in this lesson this morning it's a divine emotion as well. Doubt is not only a human emotion, but it is a divine emotion. When we despair in our lives and throw ourselves to the ground and we feel like we're crushed under that wheel, and we are people who are like Christ in the garden. Hilary of Poitiers, a 4th century author, says, this is an eternal mystery that God despairs. The only proper human response to death is doubt, fear, and a sense of loneliness. In that moment, we need someone just to sit beside us, to stay awake in the night of the Garden of Gethsemane. Alas, James, Peter, and John, the eyes were heavy, says the scriptures, and Jesus says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. His disciples couldn't stay awake, but sometimes even our friends fail us, and at times when we need them, and we fail them. It's not that we want to fail, it's just part of our human nature. This whole text is about our human nature. This is why we need Jesus, who was always ready to sit with us in the garden in the hour of need and to stay awake with us. As a part of my training, and Pastor Joe's training as a pastor in the Lutheran Church, we're required to do what's called a clinical pastoral education. That means they put us in hospitals in situations where we're forced to kind of deal with emergencies. I happened to be put into a hospital where I was on a cancer ward. I was assigned as a chaplain to one patient. His name was Clarence. Clarence was in his 80s. He had terminal cancer, emphysema, so it made it extremely difficult for him to breathe, and also tuberculosis. He was in great agony, even on good days. It got so bad that he even tried to take his own life, but fortunately did not succeed in that attempt. Anyone who visited Clarence was required to wear a full hazmat suit and mask because of the tuberculosis. Thankfully, he had a very loving family who visited him often. One night, I was on call at the hospital when a tornado threatened the area. A proper operating procedure for hospitals in such instances is to push the patients into the hallways because tornadoes can break windows, dangerously throwing glass into the rooms. So we were all busy, even I as a chaplain, pushing patients into the hallway. But the problem was we couldn't do that with Clarence. You can't push a tuberculosis patient into a hallway with other patients. So due to the storm, Clarence's family couldn't be with him. Once we'd gotten everybody in the hallway and everybody was safe except for Clarence, I went to check on him. Inside the room was a young nurse, trying to comfort him, and he was frantic. He was breathing. His breathing on a good day was horrible, but this night he was watching the storm rage outside the window. He was struggling. He was agitated. The nurse said she had to leave and take care of other patients, and I said I would stay with him. I had been ordered to go and by the doctors to try to calm the people in the hallways, for they were afraid as well. So I was trying to calm Clarence so I could get back in the hallway, but Clarence begged me. He said, "Stay with me. I don't want to die here alone. If this tornado doesn't kill me, my emphysema will, I'm sure of it." So I stayed. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think I'm particularly brave. I didn't really want to stay. I was afraid for my own life, and I tried to use all the excuses I could, but Clarence just kind of grabbed my arm and made me stay. Suddenly, we heard sirens outside. The wind roared like a train. There was this eerie green light through the window. And I'm not sure who was more afraid, Clarence or myself. I was not able to offer Clarence any courageous words at that time. I was a young pastor starting out, trying to figure out what to say. And, as pastors, we always want to have comforting words. And it felt like saying things like, don't worry, it'll be all right, God's going to get us through this. Didn't feel honest, because I wasn't sure it would. It was a very scary moment, maybe the most scary of my life. After about an hour, thank God, the wind started to die down, and we were safe again. We sat in silence the whole time. Clarence slowly started to relax, and I went to help push patients back into their rooms. To be honest, I don't think anybody really missed me out there. Before I went off to sleep, I checked on Clarence again, and he was exhausted. He said, "Thank you for staying with me." And I said, "I really thought we were going to be the last people on earth that we would see." Clarence smiled, and the nurse came in, gave him a shot, and he fell asleep. The next day, we were talking about it, and we just kind of laughed with each other, about how scared we had been and those sorts of things. The next day, he died. Pastor Joe reminded me this week of a quote by Anne Lamott. She says, "The opposite of faith is not doubt, it's certainty. Certainty is missing the point entirely. Faith includes the mess, the emptiness, and the discomforts of life. And we just have to hang on until there's light." When we are in our own Garden of Gethsemane struggling with doubt, the last thing that we need is somebody that's certain and knows everything. That they are offering us platitudes, telling us it's going to be okay, it's not so bad. No, doubt is a part of faith. What we really just need is a friend to sit with us, as Jesus asked his disciples to do. Notice he doesn't even ask them to pray with him. He just says, "Sit with me and just stay awake." And even if you don't stay awake, it seems like it's okay. Sure, the disciples were weak, and we are as well. Certainly Jesus was sad about that, but they were with him, and when Jesus did not want to be alone with his doubts. There are a lot of religious know-it-alls out there who want to tell us that we shouldn't doubt or that we have to be firm or certain. But to do so would actually to be less human, less like Jesus, who doubted in the garden, who in the garden begged that the hour would pass him by, or for the cup to remain drunk. And then he says something out of the Lord's Prayer, "But not my will, thy will be done, O Lord." Jesus, says the book of Hebrews, is the pioneer of our faith, who has gone before us and suffered in every way we have. Death comes for us all. Lent reminds us that we are dust, and to dust we shall return. Jesus knows our doubts intimately because he knows his own. He is always with us, sitting with us in the garden of our fears and doubts, no matter which way that wheel turns. Jesus sits and is awake with us. And because of that, I ask you to turn your eyes to the horizon, to a light that peeks through the trees, a dawn of a new day, still far off, but a flickering light in the darkness nonetheless. It's Easter morn, and the light of the darkness of the Garden of Gethsemane and our doubts cannot overcome it. Amen.